It is way past time to defund PBS and the hopelessly biased NPR. Let's explain. This goes way beyond just having liberal or progressive leanings for many decades now. These publicly funded broadcast media outlets have practically become arms of the Democrat Party. But two interesting news stories include Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt moving to cut funding for PBS and Elon Musk's Twitter labeling NPR state-funded media. Now, similar to the funding of Planned Parenthood, the abortion giant, for example, why should all Americans be forced to fund something with our tax dollars that does not support our values? We're going to answer that question. I'm David Fiorazzo, and this is Christ and Culture. They're doing some great things in the Sooner State, and more states should follow their lead. Oklahoma Republican Governor Kevin Stitt vetoed a bill that would have continued the funding for the state's public broadcasting service affiliate for another 3 years. He defended his decision by saying he represents all taxpayers in Oklahoma, and it was based on the, quote, indoctrination and over-sexualization of children in PBS television programs. The governor explains, quote, and then when you go through all the programming that's happening and the indoctrination and over-sexualization of our children, it's just really problematic. And it doesn't line up with Oklahoma values, end quote. I might add, nor does it line up with biblical values. So Democrats there accused the governor of mounting an attack on, quote, public education and underrepresented Oklahoma communities. Wait a minute. Did they just try playing the race card and saying LGBTQ ideology was education? Well, many of us agree with Governor Stitt that much of PBS's program content has a clear far left bias and promotes the LGBTQ agenda, including drag queens. State by state, friends. That's the battle. Why should all taxpayers help fund, for example, the Oklahoma Educational Television Authority, when it should be competing with stations and other media platforms in the private sector? Then there's NPR, or National Progressive Radio. Last month, the new Twitter labeled the social media accounts of NPR, PBS, and the BBC as government-funded media. NPR was specifically labeled state-affiliated media, which was later changed to government-funded. But after that, NPR threw a tantrum. Let's take just a brief look at just part of the Twitter policy involved here. Quote, state-affiliated media is defined as outlets where the state exercises control over editorial content through financial resources, direct or indirect political pressures, and or control over production and distribution, end quote. Now, NPR's budget is over $500 million. I think around 600 million, give or take a few. Let's hear from Joe Concha, contributor at The Hill. He said NPR is hopelessly biased. They launched in 1971 with part of its mission to, quote, speak with many voices, many dialects, which assumes that they would embrace the most important diversity of thought and speech, right? He writes that, unfortunately, it's difficult to distinguish NPR from MSNBC. There are far too many examples to cite, one of them being NPR sugarcoating its coverage of the death of Cuban dictator Fidel Castro in 2016. Another example might be they refused to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story, of course. In one scandal, NPR received $100,000 from the pro-Iran deal Plowshares Foundation to ensure that they reported on the Iran nuclear deal properly. Now, NPR has also had an obvious anti-Israel bias for as long as most of us can remember. Now, we could go on and on with examples, but for most of us, it's redundant at this point. We're informed. American citizens need to know where our tax dollars are going, and we then need to encourage our representatives to follow up and go to bat for we the people. Why should taxpayers be funding those who oppose our worldview and are loyal to one political party? Now, let's go back to PBS for those unconvinced that they have injected LGBTQ agendas in their programming geared for children. We're not just talking about Pride Month programming, which really it's Pride Year. It's all year round at this point across the board on all media. But anyway, here's a condensed list from CBN News detailing PBS content. A PBS NewsHour feature on parents' support for various gender-altering treatments, including puberty blockers. Next, they had a gay character in Work It Out Wombats. Also, PBS Kids, Clifford the Big Red Dog, introduced LGBTQ characters, including 2 lesbians. Also, a special about a town of Christians and drag queens who step into the spotlight to dismantle stereotypes. And finally, a same-sex wedding featured on PBS Kids Odd Squad. Now, this is a partial list. Do we need to go on? The animated PBS series Arthur began its 22nd season, revealing Arthur's teacher is gay. His friend Muffy asks, "Who is Mr. Ratburn marrying?" Well, another man, of course, was walking down the aisle with him. But back in 2005, in an episode from the spin-off cartoon series Postcards from Buster, Arthur's best friend meets several children who have 2 moms. Interestingly enough, they were on a trip to Vermont. You can't make this up. The show is geared towards children ages 5 through 8. Hello? 5 through 8 years old. Children. We need to start calling it what it is. Demonic, indoctrination, godlessness. They have been sadly successful at taking full advantage of the access to children they now enjoy in practically every aspect of our culture. Who will stand against this? God bless you and keep speaking the truth about things that matter.